Welcome to the Global Impact Charity Voices series, a way for you to connect with the charities and causes you care about most.
In our fifth episode of Charity Voices, we're learning about equity gaps in housing with Habitat for Humanity International. They are addressing historic inequities with fresh, bipartisan resources and learning how to adapt their mission during the COVID-19 pandemic. I am pleased to welcome Natasha Reed-Rice with Habitat for Humanity International. Natasha, there's so much that Habitat does to help people live out of poverty. What is one thing that people don't know about your organization?
One of the common things that people are surprised often to learn about Habitat is that we don't give homes away. We really adhere to our adage that we are a hand up and not a handout. And so actually we partner with families throughout the country and throughout the world to help them build homes and invest in their futures by purchasing homes from Habitat. In line with that, we also are seller financiers. So we build homes, we sell homes, and then we work with the families to establish an affordable mortgage that they are then able to use as a loan to buy their homes and to finance over a long period of time. So that's a very big myth that we often have to dispel with folks, that we do not give homes away. And another one is, as much as we love President Jimmy Carter and as much as he's considered one of our ambassadors, he was not the founder of Habitat. Habitat was founded in South Georgia, in Americus, Georgia, having been influenced under the tutelage of Clarence Jordan off of the Koinonia Farm. Millard Fuller and Linda Fuller founded Habitat in Americus, Georgia, and eventually did recruit President Jimmy Carter to be a very strong ambassador for our programming. But they founded Habitat in Americus, Georgia, in a time when the country was very divided and very segregated. And they realized there was a great need to provide an option that was affordable for families to enjoy home ownership and to participate in their home ownership. And so it's a wonderful, rich history, which perhaps we'll get into more.
Mm. And then I'd love to hear more about your role and what drew you to the organization of Habitat for Humanity International.
Sure. So I'm in a new role, and it's a wonderful new role. I'm the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. I've been in this role for a little over a month. Prior to that role, I was on the legal team for 9+ years, and I was the Associate General Counsel for Real Estate and Finance. Participated in rolling out all of our new mortgage requirements that descended in 2010 with the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act. We, for the first time, were a regulated mortgage lender in line with what I described earlier, that we are seller financiers. But I also led our new markets tax credit program and worked with our finance team to continue to provide financing solutions for affiliates in the US to build and develop and construct new homes and repair homes. So I've come into this role as the global DE&I head now, bringing that experience in our network, but also I'm a pastor. And so for me, the mission of Habitat, being an organization that seeks to put God's love into action by bringing people together to build hope and communities and crossing bridges of divide, all of that combines very nicely in alignment with what I understand my call to be and my purpose to be, both vocationally and in the work that I do outside of Habitat.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot that you have been doing, and we'd love to hear more about how not only your role intersects with the COVID-19 response, but how has the work changed or adjusted since coronavirus and the COVID has hit US and across the world?
Yeah, I think, this moment of COVID, this pandemic, coupled with the other pandemics we're seeing writ large in the country right now in terms of systemic injustices and political divisiveness, has put an even stronger focus on the value of home. When we say to people, shelter at home, it takes on a new meaning when you don't have a home to shelter in. And what these multiple pandemics have done have really highlighted the fact that we have very vulnerable populations in our country and in our world who in a moment like this are suffering even more so. So as a result, we've had to pivot as an organization to continue to support our local organizations to do the work in their communities and to provide to those who are most vulnerable an opportunity to have a place to call home. With that, we've had to pivot from our traditional model of volunteer engagement because we've had to be COVID safe. And so we're finding new ways to engage communities, to engage families, to engage partners, and provide an opportunity to continue to contribute to the great work that Habitat has done so effectively over the years. So earlier this year, for instance, we launched our first of its kind global fundraising campaign, Homes, Communities, Hope Plus You, which really is our comprehensive effort to pull together Habitat, its affiliated networks, and provide a unique opportunity to unite as one global organization and to support families and communities around the world, especially in this moment of the COVID pandemic.
And so if you could go a little bit more into depth there and talk about some of the work that you all have been doing around housing and advocacy and how that has made an impact to the work that you do every day, programmatically and directly with families.
Yeah, and it's really a strong tie into our advocacy efforts. We launched a little over a year ago our first ever national advocacy campaign to highlight all of the related issues to housing affordability. We're in our second year and hit with COVID, so it has truly increased our efforts in the advocacy realm. When we look at advocacy, especially in a US context, I mean, we've also been very actively involved in advocacy outside of the US, but particularly in the US context, our national advocacy campaign really seeks to address the equity gap that has been caused by a very segregated housing sector in our country. It was segregated by national and state law and local law in the early 1900s up until now. And so we're looking at things like inclusionary zoning, and our advocacy efforts are targeting the supply and the preservation of housing. Our advocacy efforts are targeting adequate and equal access to capital. And our advocacy efforts are targeting the development of community opportunities, working to counter displacement in areas that are becoming more and more gentrified, working to find solutions to enhance the resources to communities that have already somewhat been segregated, and not only segregated by race, but segregated from resources and opportunities. And so our advocacy campaign has stepped up its efforts to continue to partner with our local Habitat organizations throughout the country to really help them to buttress their efforts to address some of the historic systemic inequities, but also to bring in fresh resources, working together across the aisle, which is one of the great aspects of our brand, is that we've been able to effectively work across the aisle to departisanize housing. I just made that word up, so that we can really provide effective solutions for the families and the communities that we serve around the country. And really, we've taken lessons and learnings from our global advocacy campaign that was very successful throughout our the communities that we serve in South America, in Asia Pacific region, in the Europe and Middle East region. And so we've really built on those learnings of that very successful campaign to try to be and work to be as effective across the world.
Can you share an example of housing and advocacy in action?
Absolutely. So our advocacy campaign, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, is driven by the fact that in the United States, more than 18 million households spend half or even more than half of their income for housing. And so we've put a stake in the ground and said that this is unacceptable. And by doing so, we're also joining with our homeowners in this work to really create change at the ground level. One such homeowner who has truly stepped up is a woman named Juanita. Juanita and her husband, Jacques, have been Habitat homeowners in the Twin Cities area since 1995. And when they came to Habitat, Juanita was stay-at-home mom and Jacques was working at minimum wage. and they were living in a 1-bedroom apartment from paycheck to paycheck. And when they came to Habitat and were able to work with our affiliate in the Twin Cities region and have a home, have an affordable mortgage, they had such a stability that even to this day, all of these years later, Juanita has now joined us in our advocacy efforts and is one of our great voices in our advocacy efforts to really push and to show the importance of home ownership. So Juanita has been an advocate for Habitat and for home affordability in Minnesota ever since she became a homeowner. She tells her story because she can relate to the hundreds and thousands of families living paycheck to paycheck who struggle to find and keep a roof over their head while raising their children. And what's so cool about their story is that now, out of the 7 folks in their household, 5 of them are essential workers. Juanita provides administrative support to the Center for Pediatric Obesity Medicine at the University of Minnesota. Her husband, Jacques, works at the Minnesota Veterans Home. Their oldest son does research at the University of Minnesota. Another son works nights and overtime at a grocery store, and their youngest son is in the environmental services area for a hospital. So they continue to pay it back. They continue to pay it forward, and they continue to be a great example of what shelter, stability, home, opportunity, access can do, because it not only provides that for Juanita and her husband, but it's now set her family up to continue to strive for success. So the work we're doing in advocacy starts very big, but it has such real impact.
Thank you. That's amazing work that you're all doing, and really shows the resilience and the work that you do to support this issue that hits everybody, no matter what your politics are or what side of the aisle. So before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from you what you have personally learned over the last few months, and how do you keep going?
Yeah, I think one, I mean, I've learned a lot, right? I have a family as well with children who are, now working from home, who are online, who are, trying to find ways throughout this COVID pandemic, which is hitting us at all levels, to push through. So we've really emphasized in my household, but also in our place of work at Habitat, the power of resilience. The importance of, this isn't what we want it to be, but we're going to push on nonetheless, because we've got work to do. We've got families to help. We've got people to assist. We've got to be much more mindful of what we do have than what we don't have. And so there's been a very strong theme in my own home of, in this moment, we still have to look for the treasures, and we've got to ground ourselves in hope. And to bring it all back around, it really ties in very powerfully to the work that we do at Habitat. I mentioned earlier in the conversation that I'm in this new role, our global diversity, equity, and inclusion role. And we're hearing a lot of organizations that are stepping into this space of building equity, of repairing, historic and systemic disparities. In Habitat, what so excites me about this role is it's an operational and strategic role that has a theological imperative. In our organization, Habitat is founded on Christian values. We don't restrict ourselves to only working with Christians or serving Christians, but we are founded on this idea of putting love into action, that love is not a feeling and emotion. It actually compels us to serve and to help others. It also has a business imperative, that doing this work in a housing sector requires us to come face to face with some hard realities and to find ways to address them with courage and with boldness. And finally, I mentioned a little bit about our history. We come out of a history where we were founded in the ground of divisiveness, right? And when we look at our current reality, we can't not address the elephant in the room, that we are very divided as a country in the US, and we've got tensions all over the world. How do we find those efforts and those very valuable solutions and those ways to galvanize human good, to bring it together, to make a change in our communities and to transform? Those things drum together to give hope and to remind us that we're bigger and we're better than the divisiveness. And together we can really build hope and communities and find ways to find solutions, even in the hardest times. And I think quite a bit about like what my grandmother dealt with and pushed through, in Southern Georgia at a time when, things were very harsh, and yet she continued to push and have hope so that I can even that I can join you to get today on this interview and to do the work that we're doing with Habitat and with others.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. It is very inspirational, and I appreciate you taking the time to share what you have done personally, and as well as what Habitat has been working on. It is tremendous because you're helping families across the world and making real change. So thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, Kim.
That's all for today's Charity Voices series. Thank you so much for joining. Stay up to date on the work of all of our wonderful charity partners by following Global Impact on Facebook and Twitter and visiting our website, charity.org/give.